Today we're talking about the curation of a successful handmade wardrobe and how to select sewing projects with care so that you're creating items that reflect who you are and that say what you want them to say. We'll also consider how style trends factor into creating a more sustainable wardrobe and how to make sure your garment projects will be suitable for the life you really lead. This episode has been taken from the talk that I gave at the Fold Lines Sewing Weekender earlier this year, and it aligns so well with the goal of this podcast that I wanted to give it an airing here too. So stick around a couple of minutes for that. Welcome to Check Your Thread, the podcast that will help you sew more sustainably. My name's Zoe and I'm obsessed with sewing. I've been blogging about it for over 17 years and I'm the creator and host of the popular handmade wardrobe challenge, Me Made May. But like many people, I've become increasingly concerned about the climate and ecological crises, and I'm looking at the way that my lifestyle contributes to them. So in this podcast, I'll be nerding out about making clothes whilst exploring how to minimise the negative impact that it may have. I really hope you'll join me in this journey. How are you doing? Thanks so much for pressing play on this episode, and thanks to those who have shared with me what they were up to last week whilst listening to the episode with stylist Numba Pinkerton. Listener Kat was enjoying a walk with her dog Nico, and another sewing scientist on Instagram was listening whilst splitting 3T3 cells to teach their students how to do transient transfection. So please do let me know what you've been getting up to whilst listening to the podcast. I'm really nosy. So tag Check Your Thread on Instagram to satiate my curiosity. So this Saturday just gone, I attended the London Fabric Swap that I mentioned in an intro a couple of weeks ago. That was the one that was organised by Stash Hub and Bonella Fabrics, and it took place in Woolwich. It was such a great event. Yvette and Tanya did a fantastic job hosting it. Aside from some epic fabric swapping, I got to meet lots of patrons and listeners of Check Your Thread and some previous guests. So that was such a huge treat. I got to meet Louise, Caro, Claire, another Claire, Bridget, Erica, Nike, and lots more lovely people. It was really special. And I also recorded some chats, so expect an episode on that event before long. And in case you're wondering, I took to the fabric swap 3 pieces of fabric that had all been sitting in my stash unloved for well over a year. And I came away with quite a little haul. I came away with 4 lengths of jersey, 3 of which are exactly types that I've been looking for to create some items that I've been craving. And I also got some eyelet blouse fabric that will work very well with my current style shift towards a more French girl chic look. Plus some scraps of lace that I can definitely see myself incorporating into a blouse project. And some cute printed jersey scraps to make my son some undies. So yes, I took away more than I came with. But I don't think that that was a bad thing because I was there until almost the end and there was still a lot of fabric on the table. So I don't think that anyone went home empty-handed unless they wanted to. Plus, if I don't use any of the lengths or I use some of the lengths but I have some left, I'm going to take them to previous guest Nikki Barrower's fabric swap that will be taking place in London in April. So speaking of gorgeous patrons, big thanks this week to new patron Claire for signing up to support the podcast via Patreon this week. Thank you so much to everyone who keeps this podcast afloat. If you don't think you'd miss the cost of a cup of coffee once a month, and goodness knows this podcast is fueled by coffee, please head to patreon.com/checkyourthread to sign up for any amount that you wish and see what's going on over there. Right, so this week's episode, I'm so happy to be sharing this with you. As I mentioned at the top, it's from a talk that I gave earlier this year for the Fold Lines Sewing Weekender event. It was a real privilege to be invited to talk on their platform, hopefully reaching some new ears that might be curious about the many and exciting ways to sew more sustainably. I really enjoyed responding to their brief of curation and care, and to offer up an overview on a lot of the topics that I love exploring for this podcast. I've added a bunch of links to other relevant episodes of the podcast that I mentioned in this one, plus some other links to things that I talked about as well. So depending on your podcast app of choice, you should be able to see the show notes in your app. Otherwise, you can get them on the website checkyourthread.com. This is episode 199. And if you're over there, do make sure you sign up to the free weekly Check Your Thread newsletter by popping your email address in the box at the bottom of the homepage. The newsletter is always fun, always relevant, and it's always short, and it goes out on a Friday. So until next week, take good care of yourself and everyone else who deserves it. Sign up to the Check Your Thread newsletter if you haven't already, and enjoy. The topic of this year's Sewing Weekender was curation and care, which I loved so much because sewing is a superpower that allows us to create the contents of our wardrobe. Non-sewers could only dream of the amount of control and freedom of self-expression that we can exercise through our clothes. And creating clothes that we feel good in, both emotionally and physically, that express who we are, or at least who we are that day, that's a powerful way to care for ourselves. What I chose to talk about in my contribution to the Sewing Weekender, and subsequently what I'm going to be talking about in this episode, is how we can plan sewing projects that result in garments that we love to wear and that have a long and useful life, which is ultimately the secret to sewing more sustainably, in my opinion. But when I first read that the theme was curation and care, I decided to look up the definition of curation just to check that I was on the right track. The definition that I liked best said to select, organise and present. So we're going to cover selecting projects that will get lots of wear, organising your priorities and approaches to achieve that, so when you present them into your existing wardrobe, they fit right in because it's all an expression of your style. So let's talk about how to drill down on your personal style while also allowing it to evolve. We'll discuss the role of trends, then we'll think about how our lifestyle factors into our project choices also. Now, as I see it, there is another incredibly important component to making clothes that see lots of use because you love to wear them, and that is getting a great fit for your body. Now, I'm not going to be discussing that aspect today, but I do have some awesome podcast episodes on that topic that I'm going to link in the show notes if you want some extra help with fitting. And I would really like to encourage you to explore what kind of fit adjustments you might need for your unique body, just as I'm on a journey to discover those for myself. Because clothes that don't fit your body well are very likely to get passed up when you're selecting what to put on that day. And even if you do wear that garment that could fit you better, you're going to be uncomfortable and maybe self-conscious all day, and I don't want that for you. So let's get into how we select projects that truly reflect your personal style and tastes. So what suits our personal taste? What are we drawn to? Trying to describe what clothes we are drawn to can be really difficult. What styles we're attracted to is often such a subconscious and instinctive thing. But when we can start to define and put our finger on some of the elements of the things that we are drawn to, we can start to deliberately and consciously incorporate those into our sewing plans. I'm guessing that some people will find it easier than others to describe or give clear examples of the kinds of garments that they are instinctively drawn to. For the rest of us, I'd advise doing some personal detective work. We need to look for clues. The places that I've had success looking for clues are anywhere that you deliberately or accidentally collect your preferences and things that inspire you. So I've long been in the habit of saving outfits and garments that I like on Instagram and on Pinterest. Because I have years worth of those things saved, I can go through and with my metaphorical magnifying glass in hand, I can look for commonalities in the things that I've saved. If you've been saving things digitally in this way over many years as well, go through and have a look. There will most likely be some elements that will reappear again and again. Try to look for specific colours, silhouettes, fabrics and garment details. I'm sure you'll find some that reappear regularly. When I look back at the images that I've saved over the years, I can see many ruffly full-sleeve blouses and tops that are gathered into a yoke. There's lots of denim and lots of pairs of dungarees and jumpsuits. I can see that I'm drawn to African wax print, aka Ankara, and the occasional geometric print, but almost never florals, and is usually solid fabrics in certain colours that clearly appeal to me. If you haven't been using those kinds of digital tools previously, you can start doing so right away. And in fact, the algorithm on Pinterest is very good these days at serving you similar images to the ones that you just saved. So building up a style inspiration board is super quick. But doing this over a period of time will help you build up a truer sense of what actually resonates with you. So maybe try to develop a habit of saving what you really like when you scroll, or spending 5 minutes on Pinterest when you're on your morning commute perhaps. Over the weeks, months and even years, you'll get a stronger sense of who you are stylistically. Of course, if you buy physical magazines and such, you might like to make an analogue mood or inspiration board, or you could print out images that you've seen online if you wish. But I think that this is more likely to give you a snapshot in time of what you're into, rather than a view over a longer period. And I also want to bring the topic of trends into the mix, because whilst our goal is to find what kinds of garments and elements of garments truly sing to us, we're always living and making within the context of our times. Therefore, we will inevitably see an evolution in our style preferences over time. I'm sure that none of us are wearing the exact same styles that we did 15 years ago. The odd garment, perhaps. So are we meant to ignore trends when working out what styles really sing to us? Not necessarily. To me, trends are a fascinating reflection of society and culture, and the garments that we choose to wear are a way to interact with what's going on. Even those of us who don't make all the latest style trends are still interacting with others visually throughout what we wear. Trends don't always mean what's going on the catwalk or what celebrities are wearing. I think they're harder to track than that and way more interesting. As I see it, trends are collective reactions to or interpretations of what's going on in the world. Those reactions and interpretations might be experienced widely, or they could exist within a smaller community or subculture. Somehow and in some way, they take on physical manifestations. Whether we think of it in these terms or not, the changes our wardrobes undergo are due to our interaction with trends. Interacting with trends is often what drives us to sew, and trends cause our style to evolve. So whilst you might not have a subscription to Vogue or have any idea of who the latest pop stars are, if you have any kind of active cultural life or you are part of any type of community, you will be experiencing influences that will to some degree affect you and most likely your style preferences. So trends are energy, evolution and change is natural and change is healthy. For a long time I've grappled with the question, how can we simultaneously enjoy and engage with trends whilst creating garments that are going to see lots of wear over the course of years rather than months or weeks? Is it even possible? I believe so. As with many things in life, it's going to be about striking a compromise. So clothes are expressive and are tools of communication, and we do have to accept that what we want to say will change over time. And remember, garments are not solid objects that once hemmed cannot be reworked. If you make a garment and over time it starts to feel stale or boring, if it's not saying what you want it to say anymore, there are almost always ways to reinterpret something to make it feel fresh and relevant for you again. But how do you decide which trends are worth the time, energy, effort and resources to engage with? Which trends are for you and which should you observe but not interact with? So here's a quick guide to engaging with trends more sustainably. So do a gut check. How do you feel straight away? And how does this style or design element that's now suddenly everywhere relate to the styles or design elements that you've been pinning and saving for the last couple of years? Basically, if you'd seen it 3 years ago, would you have been into it then? You can also wait for a while so that you get to see more versions and interpretations of it pop up, but be aware of the effects of increased exposure. If you can find an example of this trend in the shops, you could try it on to get an instant idea if it will work for you before buying a similar sewing pattern and the fabric to make it in. Think about how you could blend the new style element with others that feel comfortably within your existing style wheelhouse. Could you add that new interesting collar or sleeve shape to the bodice of a dress that you know you always feel good in? And remember, if you go for it but it doesn't work out for you, there's most likely something you can do to rework it. So let's think more about factoring in our lifestyle into the sewing projects we choose to invest in. So remember, we're investing time, money, energy and resources into our sewing projects. So the goal is for those garments to then not languish in our wardrobes because you never got the chance to wear them. You might have created a garment that brilliantly reflects your personal style, that you took the time to alter the pattern to so it fits your body really well. But if you literally never have the opportunity, occasion or weather conditions to wear it in, then it will have been a big waste. So if we want to make clothes that will be worn often, I think we need to ask ourselves, how often is often enough? Because of course we all have our regular everyday clothes that tend to see a ton of wear. But the tasks and activities that we engage in the most often, be that work, childcare, housework, dog walking and so on, they aren't our whole lives. They might not even be the most fun bits. And of course we want to have nice clothes to wear during the fun bits. So, as I see it, the majority of our wardrobe should be suitable to wear for the things we spend the majority of our time doing. That just makes sense, right? And the amount of time we spend doing the other stuff, well, the number of items we need for those should reflect that. Obviously, not every garment should average out at the end of the year having racked up roughly the same amount of wears. But I think it helps to think in terms of the proportions of the content of our wardrobes. For example, if you only go swimming a couple of times a year, you probably don't need to have made yourself 7 swimming costumes. I'd also encourage you to question the societal assumption that you need a new outfit for every special occasion you attend. Personally, I don't go out anywhere fancy very often, and the people that I know aren't getting married too often these days either. So I have one dress that's pretty fancy and one jumpsuit that's pretty jazzy. Over the last year or two, I've found that one or other of them is suitable for every event I've been invited to. And because I don't go to fancy things very often, it feels like a treat to put on these fancy garments, and I haven't yet felt, oh, I'm wearing this dress again. But at this point, in case you're thinking, but I love to make a new outfit for every special occasion, or perhaps sewing swimming costumes is your absolute jam, even though you only have a beach or pool holiday once a year. If sewing lesser worn items brings you immense joy and happiness, then you, of course, do you. I don't want to yuck your yum. But back to picking projects that will work for your lifestyle. We want to make sure that we are making garments that will work well in at least some of the arenas in which we live our lives. Again, think about where you spend your time and what you need from your clothes as you spend it. Do you spend a lot of time chasing after toddlers? Do you have to attend a lot of semi-formal meetings for work? Are you always travelling? The best way to work out what fits your lifestyle is to work out what you already wear most often. Which is not to say that our aim here is to pick projects that replicate the garments already in your wardrobe. But giving yourself some time to analyse what you wear the most will teach you heaps of useful lessons about if something is likely to actually get use if you go ahead and make it. You probably have a pretty good idea already of what items in your wardrobe see the most use, but it really pays to take the time to give it some close attention. I'm sure you'll be surprised by how much some items get used, and perhaps how infrequently you reach for others. So there are a ton of ways you can do this. In fact, I don't think it's ever been easier to track what you wear. Within the sewing and slow fashion community, there are lots of challenges and workbooks that can help you to be more aware of what you actually wear. These usually cover a limited time period, such as a couple of weeks or a month. The obvious example is Me Made May, the wardrobe challenge that I created and host every year. If you like to do challenges and tasks in community, then knowing that thousands of other people are also keeping a close eye on what they're wearing each day for a month, it might give you the additional motivation you need. So often participants of Me Made May choose to take a photo of their outfit every day, but there are plenty of other ways to track what you wear over a period of time. You could note it down in a notebook or a note on your phone, for example, or you could do something very practical and physical. One way I've heard of is to push all your clothes to one end of your wardrobe or your clothes rail, and then when you hang an item back up after wearing it, you put it at the other end of the rail. So at the end of the month or whatever time period, you can see what's been left unworn. If you don't have that kind of space for your clothes, and I know that I certainly don't, an alternative is to have all your hangers facing one way and then turn them the other way when you've worn a garment. The lessons that I've learned from taking part in Me Made May have personally helped me so much to stop wasting my time making garments that I literally never wear. Like dresses. I don't really wear dresses. Anyway, wardrobe planners can also be helpful because often the first part offers up a structured way to analyse what you already frequently wear. Both the Seamwork and the Love to Sew podcast have free wardrobe planners or worksheets that might help you on your way. But of course, again, that's just a snapshot of a month or whatever, and it really doesn't factor in the full range of weather and temperatures that you might experience throughout the year where you live. So the longer the duration that you can track what you wear, the more useful the results will be. Therefore, you might want to start tracking what you wear longer term. At the beginning of this year, I spoke to Judith Staley for episode 179, and she told me all about how she tracked everything she wore during 2024 and some of the things that it revealed to her. And ever since I spoke to her, I've been tracking what I wear also, and it has been absolutely fascinating. So 30 wears is a figure that's often mentioned as a good yardstick for how much wear a garment should see during its lifetime. And it's been so interesting to see that I have some garments that have blasted through the 30 wears mark, and some even double that just in the first half of this year alone. However, there are, of course, a ton of garments that I own that I haven't worn yet this year. So I'm tracking what I wear using a simple tally chart method in the back of my notebook. I listed all my garments in type: outerwear, cardigans, dresses and jumpsuits, bottoms and tops, so the individual items are easier to find. I know that some people prefer to track what they wear using a spreadsheet, plus there are apps like Wearing, Wear Tracker and Index to name but a few, which you might find easier, and I'll put links to those in the show notes. But back to the question of how often is often enough to have worn something to make it worthwhile making another similar garment? Well, that is, of course, entirely up to you. Unless it's one of my special going out garments or something suited to very hot or very cold weather or something that's just suitable for like one particular activity. For me, I think that 5 wears in a year is enough for it to have earned its keep in my wardrobe. But that might not be quite enough for me to justify making something new that would serve a very similar role in my wardrobe. And remember that there are often ways to adopt certain aspects of a style or a particular garment detail into a sewing project that would work for your lifestyle. For example, if you adore the blouses that have a certain sleeve shape that you've seen everywhere, but you're the parent of a small child and a woven blouse might not see much use, could you interpret that style by applying that sleeve shape to a knit garment, such as a jersey top or a sweatshirt? And if you love the quilted jacket trend, but you live somewhere really warm, could you instead plan a lighter weight quilted cotton waistcoat, or perhaps make a quilted bag instead? So let's bring everything back together. So once you've got a good idea of the garment styles, colours, fabrics, silhouettes and details that reflect your personal style, when you're presented with new trends or sewing pattern releases, you'll have a better idea which are worth your attention and which you can observe but let pass you by. And the ones that you have ascertained might be worth exploring and adopting into your wardrobe, you can hold that up against the information that you've gathered about which garments are likely to see some, if not a lot, of use because of how and where you live your life. So I hope that that's given you some food for thought regarding planning future sewing projects so that you can select suitable patterns, colours, fabrics and details. I also hope that this has helped you organise your priorities in relation to what your clothing needs actually are, so that the garments that you make help you present yourself to the world in a way that feels authentic and expressive. Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed this episode and are left feeling inspired. For more info about the podcast, including show notes for this and every episode, head to checkyourthread.com. I'd love to hear from you, so if you have any comments, questions or ideas for future episodes, please get in touch by emailing zoe@checkyourthread.com or find me on Instagram @checkyourthread. Massive thanks to Patrick Potter for production support, to Sylvia Seller for the awesome logo design, and to Simon at Palm Skin Productions for the music. This ad-free podcast would not be possible without listener support, so if you feel you are able, please consider signing up to the Check Your Thread Patreon. For the equivalent of buying me a coffee each month, you'll be making it possible to continue producing regular episodes. Links can be found in the show notes and on the website checkyourthread.com. I hope you'll listen again next week. Until then, take care. Bye!